Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes. To keep in touch with us, use our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, which are all at Q and Review. That's CUEANDREVIEW. Or get in touch via information@qandreview.com. That's information@CUEANDREVIEW.com. Please like and share our podcasts and give us any constructive feedback.
The National, February 18. Brian Cox slams Johnson on ITV's Peston show. Report by Angus Cochrane. Brian Cox has launched a scathing attack on Boris Johnson, branding the Prime Minister a serial liar. The award-winning Scottish actor says the UK has lost the plot as he commented on the extraordinary political climate. The Succession star, who switched to back the SNP in 2015, also hit out at Labour. Appearing on ITV's Peston show, Cox spoke about the challenges facing young actors as he bemoaned a lack of social mobility in modern Britain. He continued, "We have lost the plot on so many levels, and now we have a compulsive liar who's actually leading the country, and that liar is tolerated. I find it extraordinary. I come back here, and there's this man who cannot help. He wouldn't know the truth if it landed on him." Cox also laid into Labour, the party he formerly supported, in front of Labour Shadow Cabinet member Emily Thornberry. The actor narrated adverts for Tony Blair's New Labour in the 1990s and starred in a party political broadcast for Scottish Labour. But he switched to the SNP in 2015 and has become a passionate supporter of Scottish independence. Cox said he thought New Labour would usher in a magnificent period when they swept to power in 1997. But he added, "But then Iraq and the Million-Man March went for nothing." Tory MP Bob Seeley had the task of defending Johnson on the Peston show. He claimed that the Conservative leader has many fine qualities, while acknowledging he has occasionally skirted around issues in a way that he shouldn't. "I hope we get over this period, and I hope he makes his apologies, and I hope they mean something. I've found him to be just really intellectually engaged and a good person when I deal with him, so I'm going to stick up for him in that sense. I wish that wretched Partygate had not happened." Ahead of the 2020 Holyrood election, Cox provided a voiceover for an SNP campaign video. In it, he explained why Scotland has what it takes to be an independent country. Cox also spoke about Scottish independence recently in an interview with the Sunday Times to promote his new book, Putting the Rabbit in the Hat. The Succession star said, "The United Kingdom is not united. We have been at the tap end of the bath long enough. We deserve to have our back against the smooth surface for a while. It's been tough, and it is tough, and I think Nicola Sturgeon does an incredible job, and it's a tough job." Report by Angus Cochrane. The National, February 18. Labour may have conceded defeat in Scotland, says John Curtis. Report by Hamish Morrison. Labour are more focused on winning back English Brexiteers rather than pro-EU Scots, and could already be conceding defeat in Scotland, according to Professor John Curtis. The leading political scientist said there is an implication in Keir Starmer's non-aggression pact with the Liberal Democrats that the party admits it may not win back its historic Scottish strongholds. The party has agreed an alliance with the Lib Dems to stop the Tories in English seats, reports the Financial Times. Professor Curtis said the deal had been an open secret for some time, but claimed it showed the party would be open to entering into a coalition with the Liberals in the event of a hung parliament in the next general election. The deal is irrelevant for Scottish seats because almost all are contested by a unionist party against the SNP, he said, but said it could harm the possibility of a second independence referendum. What concerns Scottish voters is in raising the possibility of a Lib coalition in Westminster in the event of a hung parliament next general election, according to the political expert. Labour are capable of getting the Tories out of power, said Professor Curtis, but might fall short of winning overall in the next poll. The Lib Dems' price for a coalition deal, he said, would likely be a strengthened pledge on electoral reform than the party secured in their 2010 coalition deal with the Tories. Professor Curtis said proportional representation would make it harder for the SNP to push for Indy Ref 2 in the long run, because the party is over-represented at Westminster. He told The National, "What is perhaps being acknowledged is there is quite a good chance Labour might not get an overall majority. If Labour do have to do a deal, probably the first port of call will be the Lib Dems, and not necessarily the SNP. You only have to look at what Starmer said on Radio Newcastle. They still are prioritising winning back Leave voters over winning back Remain voters in Scotland. That's perfectly clear." Starmer was criticised earlier this week because he said there was no case for rejoining the European Union. The deal would see Labour's campaign largely ignore seats where the contest is between the Lib Dems and the Conservatives, and vice versa. It would only apply in one Scottish Westminster seat, the paper reports, thought to be the Liberal stronghold of Orkney and Shetland. Labour was helped back into power in 1997, in part because of tactical voting in Tory marginals, which also doubled the number of seats held by the Lib Dems. The closeness between the two parties, evidenced by the deal, also harks back to the Lib-Lab coalition, which formed the first Scottish executive after devolution, according to Professor Curtis. Starmer has previously ruled out making a deal with the SNP or any other party in the event of a hung parliament. In 2021, he told the Daily Record, "You can't vote for another party and get a Labour government in Westminster. That will be our strategic approach to those elections, and there will be no coalition going into those elections and no coalition coming out of it." Scottish Labour were approached for comment. Report by Hamish Morrison. The National, February 18. Douglas Ross visits Glasgow soup kitchen and defends benefit cuts and austerity. Report by Ruth Sutter and Laura Webster. Scottish Tory leader Douglas Ross has come under fire for posing in a photo call at a Glasgow soup kitchen while defending benefit cuts by the Conservative government at Westminster. During an appearance at the Homeless Project Scotland's facility in the city centre, Ross insisted the £20 a week reduction in universal credit was not a cut, even when told that most service users had been affected by the policy change. The Murray MP suggested the £20 uplift was only required during the height of lockdown, not now when people are learning to live with COVID. This comes despite a severe spike in energy costs, a scheduled increase to the national insurance rate, and skyrocketing inflation, leading to a cost of living crisis. If we were going to continue with the £20 uplift to universal credit, it was going to cost £6 billion annually, the Scottish Conservative chief said. That money has to come from somewhere else on the welfare budget, health or education. That claim comes just weeks after the UK government decided to write off £4.3 billion in COVID payments lost to fraud, something which prompted former Efficiency Minister Lord Agnew to resign from his post in the House of Lords chamber. During his visit to the charity, which serves hot food to those in need under the Hielanman's umbrella, Ross was also challenged on the Conservative government's austerity policies, which have been blamed for the large rise in food bank usage in the UK since 2010. During that year, tens of thousands of people across the UK are thought to have used food banks. The figure for 2020-21 was more than 2.5 million. We are in challenging times, and there is no denying it, he said. Difficult decisions were taken back in 2010. I was a local councillor at the time, as far away removed from the difficult decisions as you could be, but I don't shy away from it. I understand the concerns people had at the time, and there is no doubt it did get our economy back on a stable footing. However, he argued that austerity measures put the UK in a better place ahead of the pandemic. He claimed, potentially, we were better equipped economically going into the pandemic because tough decisions were taken back in 2010 during the coalition years. This is despite scientists finding links between areas hit hardest by austerity and those worst affected by COVID-19. The MSP for the Highlands and Islands region also took time at the soup kitchen to defend the government's planned national insurance increase, suggesting it's needed to fund the NHS. Acknowledged Ross, it is a difficult decision, but by doing so we can dedicate billions of pounds of support to improve the NHS after the pandemic. We can try to provide a system that offers greater social care for those who need it in later life. These decisions are not easy, and it is not simple to say, yes, we need to do that, but not provide the funding, and that is why I supported that rise. Alison Thewlis, who represents the constituency of Glasgow Central at Westminster, was unimpressed by Ross's comments during the visit to the charity. She said, Douglas Ross has shown once again how far removed he and his party are from the realities faced by those who use food banks or have ongoing worries about their income. Mr. Ross clearly has no understanding of how important the universal credit £20 uplift was for people, and now households are under real pressure with the rise in inflation. The upcoming national insurance hike is a tax on jobs as well as on individuals. The SNP MP noted that her party had urged the Tories to reverse the universal credit and scrap the national insurance increase, but argued Ross and his colleagues had doubled down on the heinous policies which are ruining the lives of my constituents. Thewlis urged Ross to take responsibility for his own actions and support for these policies, and acknowledge that food banks are not a solution to austerity, but the outcome. Meanwhile, David Linden, the SNP's Work and Pensions spokesperson, who represents the nearby Glasgow East seat, said that Scots have had enough of Ross and his party. Douglas Ross clearly saw this as nothing more than a photo call whereby he could lecture people rather than listen to their concerns, he told The National. Despite battling a global pandemic and a cost of living crisis, the Tories remain hell-bent on making finances tighter for the lowest earners in society. It is no wonder that recent polls suggest that Scottish Tory MPs could be wiped out in the next general election. Scottish Greens co-leader and Glasgow MSP Patrick Harvey welcomed the fact that Ross visited Homeless Project Scotland to see the reality of hunger and hopelessness for himself. The project's volunteers have welcomed many politicians along to visit and volunteer in recent weeks, myself included. They do so in a non-partisan, non-judgmental way, he said. However, Ross's party must now answer some tough questions, he told The National. He continued, while the Scottish Government is doubling the Scottish child payment, that money is being taken away again by the UK Government with the UC cut. While we're asking for the power we need to pilot a universal basic income or improve the warm home discount, the UK blocks us and presides over the biggest cost of living crisis in decades. There's always more we can do, from rent controls and cutting public transport costs to making sure public services work better with volunteers like those at the Homeless Project. But we could do so much more with a change of UK government, or better still, if we had the full range of powers to act here in Scotland, he said. Report by Ruth Sutter and Laura Webster.
This article is from The National, date 18th February 2022, from the Culture section. Vegan Restaurant Scotland, 4 great veggie places to eat in 2022, by Phil McHugh. Here are 4 great vegetarian and vegan restaurants to try this year. Grams, Edinburgh. Grams is a vegan cafe that specialises in plant-based meals and covers a variety of dietary needs, including gluten-free alternatives. Popular for brunch, Grams dishes include vegan nachos with cashew cheese sauce, avocado and pulled pork, as well as clean beans on sourdough toast with tofu scramble topping. Baba, Edinburgh. Baba, which celebrates the flavour of the Levant, is the creation of the team behind Glasgow's award-winning Ox and Finch restaurant. You'll discover a range of meze and grill platters great for sharing, including char-grilled broccoli with lentils, pomegranate and hazelnuts, and cauliflower shawarma among the main courses. The Hug and Pint, Glasgow. The Hug and Pint is the ideal spot for some live music, drinks and a bite to eat from the dedicated vegan kitchen. Its menu is inspired by Asian cuisine and changes every day, but expect excellent dishes like miso aubergine, Korean kimchi and jackfruit curry. Ranjit's Kitchen, Glasgow South Side. Food at Ranjit's Kitchen, one of Glasgow's best restaurants, is entirely vegetarian. Ranjit, who is originally from Punjab, delivers her unique recipes and love for cooking that makes this restaurant a hidden gem. Vegan staples include dal, which is lentil, chana and aloo, or potato-based curries, along with deep-fried vegetable pakoras, sweet chutneys and tangy pickles. That article was by Phil McHugh. This article is from the Glasgow Times, date 18th February 2022, from the Lifestyle section. Glasgow Buchanan Gallery's demolition plan will attract strong investor interest. By Drew Sandilands, local democracy reporter. There will be strong investor interest in Glasgow if the £825 million plan to demolish Buchanan Galleries and build a new urban quarter goes ahead, a property expert has predicted. Louise Norris, a city-based commercial property partner at a legal firm Lindsay's, believes the redevelopment would be an exciting prospect for businesses. And she said, a joined-up approach to revamping the city centre is needed, looking at Sauchiehall Street and Argyll Street too. This week, Glasgow's City Centre Task Force announced plans to review the current style mile, Argyll, Buchanan and Sauchiehall Streets, due to retail trends and the increase in empty units and sites. It intends to take a master planning approach to create a mix of uses, including shops, homes, bars, restaurants and leisure venues. The task force, which has public and private sector members, is chaired by Councillor Angus Miller and Stuart Patrick, the Chief Executive of Glasgow's Chamber of Commerce. Plans for the review have been revealed just weeks after the council agreed to talk with the head tenant of Buchanan Galleries, Landsec, over the transformation and as big-name retailers such as Marks & Spencer pull out of Sauchiehall Street. Councillor Miller said the three main streets are at the heart of Glasgow's shopping district, but we know the retail sector is changing. Securing a vibrant, sustainable future for the city centre will mean supporting a range of uses, including retail, hospitality, office and residential, and undertaking a master planning approach will help identify the right mix for these key destination streets. Lindsay's partner, Ms Norris, believes a big picture approach is vital if the new blueprint will help the city reach its potential. She said, I would expect there to be a healthy interest from investors looking to become part of what could emerge from the Buchanan Galleries area, both in terms of developing and setting up businesses there. It's an exciting prospect. Just look at the transformation of the merchant city in recent times as an example of what can be achieved to create a welcoming, successful area. There's an opportunity to deliver that on a wider scale. A joined-up approach with everything else going on throughout the city centre will be an important part of the wider success for the city though. By taking holistic action across the whole area from Sauchiehall Street down Buchanan Street to Argyll Street, there's a chance to have developments which complement each other and create a great overall experience. Hopefully the plans for Buchanan Galleries and the St Enoch's Centre can really unlock that potential. At St Enoch's Centre, there are currently plans for a £500 million transformation, which includes 1,700 new homes, offices and a 4-star hotel. The rise of online shopping, as well as the pandemic and workers spending less time in offices, has left a once thriving retail sector struggling. Ms Norris added, there's no hiding from the challenges that the retail sector faces. Changing habits accelerated by the impacts of COVID-19 mean that bigger shops are going to have difficulties. The plans which are emerging show that out of these challenges are coming opportunities to create a city centre that is stronger and more sustainable economically and environmentally. Mixed-use city centres where people can live, work and enjoy leisure time are going to be an important part of a vibrant, successful future. That article was by Drew Sandilands. This article is from The National, date 21st February 2022, from the Culture section. Jamal Edwards, SBTV founder, hailed as legend as tributes pour in. By Angus Cochrane. Tributes are being paid to music entrepreneur Jamal Edwards, who has died at the age of 31. The SBTV founder gained fame from setting up the new music platform which helped to launch a string of UK music careers, including Dave and Jessie J. He was an ambassador for the Prince's Trust, a charity headed by the Prince of Wales, and in 2014 he was awarded an MBE for his services to music. His manager told the PA news agency that Edwards died on Sunday morning. Tributes to Edwards have flooded social media, with many expressing their condolences to his mother, the Loose Woman panellist Brenda Edwards, who finished 4th in the second series of The X Factor in 2005. Loose Woman's Denise Welsh said, "My heart aches for my friend Brenda. I can't bear it. Jamal Edwards was a wonderful son and brother." It was confirmed Edwards died following a sudden illness. BAFTA-winning actor, director and producer Adam Deacon, known for his leading role in Kidulthood, said he was heartbroken about Edwards' death. He posted on Twitter, "Today I was on set when I found out the tragic news that my good friend Jamal Edwards has passed away, and I'm honestly heartbroken. Jamal was one of the nicest, most down-to-earth and humble men I've met in this industry. He always gave me time, even when no one else would. He was an inspiration, and what he achieved in life was truly remarkable. Thinking of his friends and family at this devastating time, rest in peace, Jamal Edwards." The official YouTube Twitter account said the industry had lost a legend, adding, "Jamal Edwards was an inspiration to so many, supporting artists and shaping culture through at SBTV Online. Sending our condolences to Jamal's family and community." Tributes also extended beyond the entertainment landscape, with Chelsea FC paying respects to the Blues superfan. The football club wrote on Twitter, "We're deeply saddened to learn of the passing of Jamal Edwards. An inspiration to many, we're honoured that he was part of our Chelsea family. Our thoughts are with everyone who knew and loved him." Edwards was a teenager when he launched the youth broadcasting and production film channel SBTV to upload clips he had recorded of his friends performing on the estate where he lived in Acton, West London. By 2014, he had amassed an estimated fortune of around £8 million and worked with the likes of Jessie J, Emily Sandé and Ed Sheeran. Speaking to PA after being made an MBE, he said he'd started SBTV to give his friends a platform. He added, "It was a frustration of going to school and everyone talking about how we get our videos on MTV. YouTube was like a year old, and I was like, I've got a camera for Christmas, I'm going to start filming people and uploading it. Everyone was looking at me like, what are you doing? Like, you can compete with these major corporations? But I think I was nearly enough to believe that I could make a change." In the same interview, he described his working relationship with musicians as symbiotic. 50% is the talent and 50% is the platform, he said. "I try to focus on people who haven't got the platform. As well as getting a really well-known artist, I want to get the up-and-coming ones as well." That article was by Angus Cochrane. This article is from The National, date 21st February 2022, from the Politics section. "Rosyth shipyard will stay put in an independent Scotland, says Babcock official." By Ninian Wilson. The Chief Corporate Affairs Officer at Babcock has confirmed there are no plans to move the Rosyth shipyard in the case of an independent Scotland. Babcock's John Howie says that the firm's recent £76 million investment into the Rosyth dockyard proved that the site was a core part of our business strategy. during the Scottish Affairs Committee briefing on Monday. The comments came after the Prime Minister visited the Rosyth dockyard last week to witness the first of the new Type 31 frigates being built for the Royal Navy. Following the visit, Babcock CEO David Lockwood suggested that if the firm was not welcome in an independent Scotland, it could relocate to England in 3 years. He told the Courier, "I don't think independence is anything that we can't manage as a company. When you look at the timelines, there's nothing we can't manage as a company. If we had to replicate this in England because we were told that we weren't welcome here, which I think would be a bad mistake for Scotland, but if that were the decision, we can replicate this in 3 years, and the time window of negotiations is longer than that." During the committee briefing on Monday, SNP MP Deirdre Brock asked Howie if the SNP had actually said that Babcock would not be welcome in an independent Scotland. She said, "I wonder if you're able to point to where the SNP has indicated it wouldn't welcome the work that Babcock is doing at its dockyards, all the decommissioning works it's undertaking through its subsidiary company Cavendish. Where has the SNP indicated that it wouldn't be welcome in an independent Scotland?" Howie responded, "Nobody has told us we wouldn't be welcome." He went on to say, "We have recently invested £76 million in the site at Rosyth. That is a core part of our business strategy. I think what the chief executive was trying to do was deal with, there's always competing pieces between shareholders who worry about what constitutional changes mean for business continuity. And the reality is that our business can operate from wherever it needs to, but we're not expecting, and we wouldn't have invested that money in the site of Rosyth if we were expecting to make changes in it." That article was by Ninian Wilson. This article is from The National, date 21st February 2022, from the Culture section. The Woman Who Shaped Scotland, A Closer Look at Glasgow's Past, by Judith Duffy. Touring around Scotland, it is the statues and stories of men that are most visible. The contribution of women who have shaped our world is just as important, but not as easy to find. That's why The National is publishing a series of guides highlighting the importance of women to our towns and cities, from art and architecture to food and football. So travel with us round the streets of Glasgow as we explore some of the stories of women, past and present. The shopping centre with a saintly connection. The mother of St Mungo, the city's patron saint, is remembered in the name of St Enoch Square, which is also the site of one of Glasgow's main shopping centres. Known by different names, including St Thenno and St Thenu, according to legend, the 6th century princess was first banished from court for refusing to marry the man chosen by her pagan king father. Then, when she became pregnant as the result of rape, he ordered her to be hurled from a hill in East Lothian. She survived the fall, and after being guided to shore by a shoal of fish, was given sanctuary and gave birth to Mungo. She was described as being on record as Scotland's first recorded rape victim, battered woman and unmarried mother by historian Elspeth King in her book The Hidden History of Glasgow's Women. The tree planted by suffragettes. A wander down leafy Kelvin Way in the west end of the city is always a pleasant stroll. Yet many might not know there's one tree which has more significance than most. The suffragette oak has stood for more than 100 years, although it was left battered by storms. It was planted to mark the passing of the Representation of the People Act on February 6, 1918, which allowed some, but not all, women the right to vote for the first time. A ceremony to plant the tree marking the long battle for women's right to vote was attended by various women's suffrage organisations of Glasgow and across Scotland. In 2015, it topped a public poll to win the recognition of Scotland's Tree of the Year. A library dedicated to women. Glasgow Women's Library in Bridgeton recently celebrated its 30th anniversary and is the only accredited museum in the UK dedicated to women's lives, histories and achievements. It has shelves crammed with literature and archives relating to women, and also offers in-person heritage walks around the city and a series of downloadable audio tours. Royalty, political activists and philanthropists. There's only a handful of statues of women in Glasgow, compared to 11 commemorating men in George Square alone, where Queen Victoria is the solitary female representative. However, sticking with the Victorian era, Elder Park in Govan is named after and home to the statue of Isabel Elder, a philanthropist and supporter of women's education, who ran one of the biggest shipyards in the world for a short time after her husband died. She gifted the 37-acre Elder Park to the community in 1885. Two more modern statues of women in the city are La Pasionara at Custom House Quay, which represents Spanish Communist Party leader Dolores Ibarruri. It marks the legacy of 550 Scots who left their homeland to fight in the Spanish Civil War against Franco's fascist forces. Govan is also the home to a statue of political activist Mary Barber, which was unveiled in 2018 after a long campaign to honour her role in leading the rent strikes in 1915. The Time Capsule Flat. An intriguing museum in Garnet Hill offers the chance to step into life in Glasgow frozen in time in the early 20th century. Once home to shorthand typist Agnes Teward, the beautifully preserved flat was taken into the care of the National Trust for Scotland after her death in 1975. The extensive personal archive at the tenement house reveals what it meant to be an independent working woman at that time. A monument to maternity. A giant metal nappy pin sculpture, designed by George Wiley in Rotten Row Gardens, Montrose Street, marks the former site of the Royal Maternity Hospital, better known to generations of Glaswegians simply as the Rotten Row. The maternity hospital was one of the first specialist hospitals in the city, founded in 1834 in Greyfriars Wynd, before moving to St Andrew's Square in 1841 and Rotten Row in 1860, where it remained until it was demolished in 2001. From soul food to Michelin stars. There are no shortages of places to eat in Glasgow, but it was a female head chef who ended the city's near 2-decade wait for another Michelin star. Lorna McNee took the helm of restaurant Kaelbruch in 2020 and was awarded a coveted Michelin star the following year. You could also try Soul Food Sisters Cafe in the Gallowgate, a social food enterprise run by a collective of migrant women which also caters for events and runs cooking workshops. Or visit the Willow Tea Rooms in Suckyhall Street, opened in 1903 by Miss Catherine Cranston, also known as Kate. She used Charles Rennie Mackintosh and his wife Margaret MacDonald, who was also one of the key figures in the Glasgow style, to design the premises, which reopened in 2018 after extensive refurbishment. Britain's first female architect. The Mercat Cross at Glasgow Cross may look medieval, but it is actually a replica unveiled in 1930 to replace the one removed in 1649. It was designed by Edith Burnett Hughes, who established her own firm in 1920 and was considered to be Britain's first practising female architect. She was also head of Glasgow School of Art, School of Architecture, and her other works include Coatbridge War Memorial, built in 1924. Other notable buildings designed by women in Glasgow include the Riverside Museum, the work of internationally renowned architect Dame Zaha Hadid, who died in 2016. Sporting heroes. Glasgow women's football team became the first Scottish side to progress to a Champions League quarter-final in 2008. Glasgow City FC, formed in 1998, is based at Petershill Park in Springburn and is the most successful women's club in Scotland, having won 14 Women's Premier League titles, including 13 in a row, a national record. Another sporting hero from Glasgow has a long-standing place in the history books as the only Scottish woman to win an Olympic medal in swimming, a record achieved back in the 1912 Stockholm Olympics. Belle Moore from Govan represented Britain at the Games, the first at which women's swimming was permitted. She won gold in the women's 4x100 freestyle relay, setting a new world record, and all this at the age of just 17. Moore, who later emigrated to the US, died aged 80 in 1975 and was inducted into the Scottish Sports Hall of Fame in 2012. That article was by Judith Duffy.
From the National, Tuesday the 22nd of February 2022, from the news section, Edinburgh ready to start rehoming Afghan refugees before month's end, by Gregor Young. Council chiefs in Edinburgh said yesterday that the city is ready to start permanently rehoming scores of Afghan refugees by the end of the month. Council leader Adam McVeigh issued a statement after it emerged that more than 200 people are still in temporary accommodation. Families fleeing the ongoing crisis in Afghanistan who arrived in the Scottish capital have so far been housed in hotels due to a shortage of suitable housing in the city. But SNP leader Adam McVeigh insisted the city is in a position to secure homes in the coming weeks. Councillors said they will also consider increasing the number of refugee places in the city from the current 100 to 150 at a Policy and Sustainability Committee meeting today. City of Edinburgh Council confirmed that no households have been resettled permanently in Edinburgh as yet in its latest refugee resettlement report. The delay in providing permanent homes has been blamed on a shortage of social housing, according to the refugee report. Council officers warned, availability of permanent social housing remains a city-wide challenge. It is also important to note that Afghan families can require properties with 4 bedrooms or more, a configuration which is typically in extremely short supply within social housing stock. They said it is highly likely the private rented sector options will play more of a role in resettlement accommodation in the future than it has to this point. So far, the council has provided temporary accommodation for Afghan families in hotels and on 2 occasions, initially for 75 people from September until October last year, and then for 144 people across hotels from January. McVeigh said in his statement, "The experience of those fleeing the homes is beyond harrowing, and we are committed to helping whatever way we can. Over recent years, we've been able to resettle hundreds of refugees, and these proposals mean we'll be able to give even more people safety and a bright future in our capital." McVeigh added, "We have been liaising with the UK government to secure the support necessary, and will continue working to explore accommodation options. We are now in a position to work on finding people permanent housing, and are looking forward to resettling our first Afghan households by the end of the month." In a letter sent to McVeigh, the Home Office claimed councils will receive a generous funding package to support the resettlement of Afghan families who have come to the UK. They added, "We continue to work with local authorities to source appropriate accommodation as quickly as possible, although we've had to use hotels as a temporary measure due to unprecedented demand. Alongside this engagement with local authorities, we are reaching out to landlords, developers and the wider private rented sector to encourage further offers of properties, either directly or through our housing portal." The Home Office confirmed local authorities to support people through the UK Government's Afghan Citizens Resettlement Scheme, ACRS, or Afghan Relocations and Assistance Policy, ARAP, scheme, both set up to help resettle more than 5,000 people in the first year and up to 20,000 over the coming years, will receive £20,520 per person over 3 years for the resettlement and integration costs. Councils and health partners who resettle families will also receive up to £4,500 per child for education, £850 for English language provision for adults requiring this support, and £2,600 for healthcare. And that was a report by Gregor Young. From the National, Tuesday the 22nd of February 2022, from the comment section: challenging entrenched democracy in the UK needs more than anger. A comment piece by Jerry Hassan. 60 years ago, the British establishment was losing its authority, moral compass, and in deep decay. The Tory party was marred by scandal and misconduct by senior ministers, with an out-of-touch PM, Harold Macmillan, failing to grasp the scale of the crisis and decay. Meanwhile, organised religion and traditional authority were characterised by hypocrisy and double standards, with repressive attitudes holding back progress. In this climate, people were indignant, filled with anger and rage at the brazen arrogance of the establishment and elites. A new wave of satire, led by the likes of Private Eye and That Was the Week That Was, poked fun at the ridiculous attitudes and behaviour of those who felt they were born to rule. At the same time, a confident younger country was saying that this is not good enough. There was the critique of Anthony Sampson's Anatomy of Britain, first published in 1962, which itemised the interconnections of the establishment. Across politics, business, law, the military and media, these folk, nearly all men, went to the same private schools, universities, dining clubs, and surprisingly shared the same view of the world. Alongside this, a more classless Britain was emerging via pop and rock music, from the Beatles to the Rolling Stones, the Kinks and Who, and many more. And through fashion, movies and wider culture, from Terence Conran to Mary Quant and Sean Connery. That was then and this is now. The UK is a country wealthier than ever, with economic prosperity undreamt of compared to previous generations in real terms, yet the UK today is characterised by multi-billionaires, an explosion in asset wealth, and widespread hardship, poverty, and a growing industry of food banks. Today's British establishment is a staggering landscape to survey, as nearly every institution in public life in crisis. The Tory party is led by a PM being investigated by the police for breaking his own COVID lockdown restrictions. On Sunday morning TV with Sophie Rayworth, Boris Johnson refused to answer 17 times about his breaking the law, beating the previous record set on a politician not answering journalist questions by Michael Howard of 12 refusals. This trivialises the moral abyss of the Tories class to the decaying embers of Boris Johnson's debased premiership. For this is not just about one immoral individual, but about Toryism. Billions have been awarded to cronies and corporate chancellors, amounting to the industrial waste of £37 billion in PPE contracts, with billions written off in fraud. Alongside that, the Tory party has been selling access to government ministers for a contribution of £250,000 per annum to the party, providing the opportunity to influence policy, such as stopping higher tax for the ultra-rich. The monarchy, the supposed anchor of British life, in the year of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, has witnessed the Queen's favourite son, Andrew, give a reported £10 million plus to Virginia Giuffre, a woman he still claims he has never met. The next king, Prince Charles, found himself under police investigation for his charity offering cash for honours to a Saudi Arabian businessman. The Crown here seems to have been explicit about it and putting it in writing, considering the entire honours system in House of Lords as a cash for honours patronage racket of the political system. If that were not enough, there are the ongoing scandals of the Met, which finally forced the resignation of Cressida Dick. This, after an inquiry last year found it institutionally corrupt, alongside the Charing Cross Police WhatsApp avalanche of violent abuse, the killing of Sarah Everard by a serving policeman, and many botched investigations such as that into serial killer Stephen Port. These are the big scandals which dominate the headlines. There are many more. The Post Office Paymaster story is one of the great tales of injustice in the history of the UK. 20 years after it began, a public inquiry is finally underway, but no one from the Post Office or Fujitsu, the company which built the faulty computer system, has apologised and resigned. The armed forces were humiliated after 20 years of intervention in Afghanistan and Iraq, with no inquiry planned into the military failure and defeat of UK forces. Chilcot, we should remember, was an examination of the political and intelligence failures of Iraq. One convention of UK public life is that the military leadership are never held to account for their failures, down the ages from Gallipoli to Tobruk and Singapore. The mainstream UK newspapers post-Leveson are delighted that they have avoided regulation. Meanwhile, the Murdoch Empire and Daily Mail are out for revenge and out to bring the BBC down to their level, hence cheapening and making more coarse and brutal everyday public discourse. What is missing compared to 60 years ago? For a start, where are the ethical leaders and role models in civic culture and business saying the current state of affairs is shocking? Beyond the likes of celebrity campaigners like footballer Marcus Radford and food campaigner Jack Monroe, institutionally, there is silence. 16 years ago, there was widespread anger and disgust at British elites. Even more so, there was an impatience that the new, more open, tolerant classless society was waiting and wanting to come forward and find expression. It does not have to be like this. 20 out of the UK's 55 PMs went to Eton. All but 2 of the 12 PMs who won post-war elections went to Oxford, the exceptions being Winston Churchill and John Major, Alec Douglas-Hume, Jim Callaghan and Gordon Brown, who never went to Oxford, did not win an election. Challenging this requires anger, but needs much more. It needs a political countercharge and requires a political revolution calling time on this closed-shop chimocracy, which leaves the vast majority of us on the outside as mere spectators. It needs more than politics. It requires culture to challenge this. Music, film, documentaries, comedy and more. The mainstream needs posed as the problem and challenged, provoked and satirised. We need to say that Britain is irredeemably broken. Scottish opinion has to be allies and agents of aiding wider change, while independence cannot just settle for not being Westminster. In this set of crises, the ideas underpinning independence need to embody accountability and democracy, alongside a desire and commitment to holding our own institutions and elites to a set of standards. Such an approach would help change across the UK and make people here more confident of the appeal of independence. And that was a comment piece by Jerry Hassan.
Recorded from the National on the 22nd of February 2022. From the Culture section, Beth Whitelaw, Language Brings Us Joy, so Scotland Must Get Curriculum Right, by Beth Whitelaw. Beth Whitelaw continues her journey through Sunset Song and beyond. I used to despise Gaelic classes in primary school, constantly repeating the mantra to myself that it was a dying anyway, who cared if I was any good at it. Years later, I went to the Tyree Music Festival and spent the whole time being exceptionally jealous of the people I was there with, who could speak entirely in Gaelic to each other for hours at a time. My reticence to apply myself properly in these classes now feel like a slight on my future self. How could the ability to speak any language be a waste? How could having multiple ways to express an emotion, or the sound of rain, or the colour of the clouds be a burden? The concept of language being a waste is part of the ideology of the oppressor, of a homogenized language that wants to erase the medium for collective connection and nuance and hope and joy. Dr. Amanda Thompson writes in her introduction to a Scots Dictionary of Nature, in looking through these old Scots dictionaries, there's a resonance with a different time as well as the different connections to place, land, weather, and perhaps a link to previous generations, both in the broadest sense and in the more intimate and immediate sense. Indeed, when I walked the West Highland Way last year, when it rained it wasn't wet, it was dreich. As we walked along Loch Lomond, the light was skimmering off the rippling surface. After 4 days of walking, we weren't trudging along with our blisters, we were hirpling. I want to emphasise that I'm not trying to prove the poverty of the English language to express anything meaningfully. It is a wonderful, infuriating, delightful language, and I've spent many years studying it in its various constructions. There are words like cleachan and supine and pitrachor that contain their own magic too, but it's also a comfort to know that there are Scots words which exist to capture an exact sensation felt in a distinct landscape during a precise moment in time. Reading Sunset Song at 16 was so important. It woke me up to the other realization that there were other writers out there that could give me that same feeling of being seen. It breaks my heart that I had to wait so long. I can't imagine how many children have missed out on the joy of reading because the curriculum has failed to offer them the right book at the right time. I just got lucky. And I was lucky enough that the experiences resonated with my own upbringing in a rural setting in Scotland. I don't want to pretend Sunset Song is some sort of catch-all book that will awaken everyone to the joys of reading. Plenty of my friends that studied the book absolutely hated it. I know an enormous amount of people disliked English more than any class in school. A big part of me wonders if this could change if the curriculum was given a radical refresh. The Scottish curriculum at present offers a similar set text list for National 5 and higher English classes to when I was studying for my exams in 2014-2015. For the set text part of the exam, teachers can pick from a range of drama, poetry and novels. Prose choices for National 5 are Anne Donovan, James Robertson, Robert Louis Stevenson, Robin Jenkins and Ian Crichton Smith. At higher level, George Mackay Brown is substituted in for Anne Donovan, and Lewis Grassic Gibbon replaces James Robertson. Although this list contains some of my own favourite writers, you can't help but notice all of these texts were published more than a decade ago. Male writers at National 5 level outweigh female writers by a ratio of 4 to 1. In the prose section for higher, there are no female writers. There are no writers of colour. Where is the representation of Scottish people of colour, of Scottish migrants, of the Scottish underclass? Where, and I think this is one of the most key questions, is the representation of youth? For it is the young that study these novels. The English curriculum, by contrast, has just appointed 4 new novels to their A-level and GCSE English literature curriculum. Passing by Nella Larson, Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, The Lonely Londoners by Sam Selvin, and one of my all-time favourite novels, Girl, Women, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. 4 of these novelists are women. 4 of these novels are written by people of colour. For the critical essay part of the exam paper, teachers are free to select the text they wish to teach, but they may find it difficult to stray too far from the conventional literary canon. Worksheets and reading materials are time-consuming to produce, and the questions in exam papers can often be restrictive. This means new and diverse texts will often be sidestepped for texts that are reliable and long guaranteed to fit exam questions. Quite simply, the Scottish curriculum needs to do better. That article was by Beth Whitelaw. Recorded from the National on the 22nd of February 2022. From the Culture section. Put your jigsaw to one side as elderly friends crack murder mystery by Gemma E. McLaughlin. The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman, published by Penguin. This is the first entry in comedian Richard Osman's endlessly quick-witted murder mystery. It is a unique and unforgettable read, accessible and enjoyable for teenagers around 14 and older, but is one I would recommend to all. Before this, I would not have seen comedy and mystery to be a combination that would work, and certainly not one that would work so well as to spark a best-selling series with a third instalment on its way this year. Osman's heavy focus on recognisable and detailed characters and clever comebacks is what makes this novel stand out, and those who read it laugh out loud. While it is not the first combination of genres one might expect, it is one that has been conquered on both sides. A murder mystery that will have you guessing at every moment, and a sense of humour that will have you reading lines out to friends and family throughout. Among that which is unusual about this book is its setting and main characters. This is not a classic murder solved by a lone wolf retired police officer set in a bustling city. In fact, it takes place somewhere that on the surface you would never expect to find such shocking events and such sharp detection. The Cooper's Chase retirement village in Kent is luxurious and full of activities for its residents around and over 70 to pass the time with, including one kept secret from those running it. Every Thursday, 4 residents, Elizabeth, Joyce, Ron and Ibrahim, meet to go over old unsolved murder cases and try to solve them with the help of their individual skills from their prior careers. In the beginning, it is nothing more than an opportunity for a hobby more than intellectually stimulating and challenging than what's officially on offer at Cooper's Chase, such as jigsaws and Zumba. But everything changes when their theoretical chats over wine become much more. When a new development is announced and the head builder, Tony, who has worked for years with landowner Ian on the village, is found dead, the club decides it's time they take on a real, active case for the first time. While they don't have access to all that the police do, their friendship with Constable Donna De Frita and experience working together to solve murders in the past works in their favour. With more secrets and even bodies piling up, the group finds links to other crimes, and now, with a murderer on the loose, what began as a way to pass the time has become more dangerous than any of them could have ever have imagined. The intricacies of the murder, as the reader figures them out alongside the police and four eccentric friends, are never dull. This is a story that not only ignores but challenges ageist ideas of growing old and boredom, both of hobbies and mind. The Thursday Murder Club are a captivating group to watch, with each character bringing something unique to the group in their ability to solve crime and in their ability to contribute to the ever-present humour of the story. You root for their wins from the moment of their introduction, and to watch them solve a murder mystery is not dark, gritty and intense, but exciting, and joyful even, leaving this book impossible to put down. This is easy to recommend for its unique approach to the genre it tackles, the unpredictable twists of the plot, and of course, the friendships it highlights. That article was by Gemma E. McLaughlin.
The National, Politics, on Wednesday the 23rd of February. Liz Truss exposed in car crash interview, an article written by Emma O'Toole, multimedia journalist. Liz Truss has come under fire for denying how close the UK government is to Russian money. In an interview on BBC Breakfast, the Foreign Secretary was shown a photo of her beside Lyubov Chernukin, a former banker married to the former Russian oligarch Vladimir Chernukin. Chernukin is one of the biggest female donors in recent British political history, and since 2012 she's given the Tories £2.1 million. BBC Breakfast presenter Dan Walker asked Ms Truss, "Let me show you a picture from May of 2019. This is when Theresa May was Prime Minister, and this was from your Instagram. I think the thing you posted with this was Ladies' Night. There you are next to Theresa May. Next to her on the other side is Lyubov Chernukin, who's the wife of a former Russian minister, who's given the Conservative Party more than £1.8 million. That makes her the biggest female donor in recent British political history. Her wealth comes from her husband Vladimir, who has strong links to the Kremlin. Now in that picture there are 6 female cabinet members. Liz Truss, that shows us, doesn't it, the closeness of the British government to Russian money." Ms Truss responded, "What I can say to you today is that we will target anybody who we believe has links to the Putin regime, who's helping to support and prop up the Putin government, and nothing is off the table in terms of who we target." Russia is currently estimated to have 150,000 troops massed on the borders around Ukraine, with warplanes and armoured vehicles continuing to deploy in the area. When asked if she's embarrassed at seeing the photograph, Ms Truss said, "No, I'm not. I attended the dinner at the time. I make my decisions as Foreign Secretary on the basis of what is right. And as I've said, without prejudice, we'll target anybody who is of interest in terms of the Russian regime, who is helping prop up Vladimir Putin's appalling regime, and there are no other considerations as far as I'm concerned." Mr Walker asked, "Do you think that the money that's been donated to the Conservative Party should be given back?" Ms Truss responded, "As I said, there's money donated to the Conservative Party. Everybody who donates is on the British electoral register. They're fully vetted before making those donations. I think it's very important that we don't conflate people with Russian heritage and Russian backgrounds with people who are close to the Putin regime. What I'm clear about is that we will target people who are close to the Putin regime. We'll target companies who are supportive of the Putin regime and are helping prop up the economy." The clip was mocked on Twitter, with many people pointing out Ms Truss's hypocrisy. One user said, "This is genuinely funny. Turns out there's nothing wrong with taking money from an appalling regime on which you're declaring sanctions, if you're Liz Truss, that is." Kenneth Watt said, "Oh dearie me, how embarrassing can our government actually become? And this is cringeworthy." Another said, "Swear at one point you could see Liz Truss's soul leave her body, forced out by shame. But obviously that's impossible because that would require her having a soul, which of course she doesn't." James Whitson added, "Every time a politician starts an answer with 'what I can say,' You know they're not going to answer that question. It follows Vladimir Putin's announcement that Russia would recognise the breakaway republics of Donetsk and Luhansk in eastern Ukraine, a move seen by many in the West as a precursor to a full-scale invasion. Mistrust said it's still unclear whether Russian troops have crossed into the territories after Mr. Putin said he was authorising the dispatch of peacekeepers into the area. That is, frankly, ambiguous at this stage, she told Sky News. We've heard from Mr. Putin himself that he's sending in troops. We don't yet have the full evidence that that has taken place. She said, however, that Britain and other Western allies are determined to make it as difficult as possible for Russia if an attack does take place, including through the supply of defensive weaponry to Ukraine. I believe that Mr. Putin is hell-bent on invading Ukraine, she told BBC Radio 4's Today programme. This is about inflicting pain on Mr. Putin and degrading the Russian economic system over time, targeting people that are close to Mr. Putin. What we have to do is make it as painful as possible, both by supplying support to the Ukrainian government in terms of defensive weapons, in terms of economic support, and by imposing economic costs. An article written by Emma O'Toole. The National News on Wednesday the 23rd of February. Students and education staff protest outside the Scottish Parliament. An article written by Sean Bell. Politicians from all parties except the Tories joined demonstrators at a rally for education held outside the Scottish Parliament in support of strike action by the University and College Union, or UCU. The rally, jointly held by the UCU and the National Union of Students Scotland, follows Monday's announcement that staff at 3 more Scottish universities will strike over pay and pensions, bringing the number of institutions affected to 11. The union is asking for a £2,500 pay rise for all university employees, arguing that staff pay has fallen by more than a quarter in real terms since 2009. However, this has been dismissed by the Universities and Colleges Employers Association as unrealistic. NUS Scotland President Matt Crilly told the assembled demonstrators, "We're here because students and staff in Scotland are being let down by the same failing education system." Crilly cited new research published this week by the NUS Scotland, which showed that 12% of students in Scotland had experienced homelessness since beginning their studies. 35% had considered dropping out of their courses due to financial difficulties, and that 25% had been unable to pay their rent in full on one or more occasion. "We know that staff's working conditions are students' learning conditions," Mr. Crilly said. UCU Scotland President Lena Vangren, a tutor at the University of Edinburgh, also said, "We have people leaving the sector because we're falling ill, because we can't afford to keep being on these horrible, precarious contracts. The people who are leaving because they're facing the burden more than others are people of colour, women and disabled people. We're on strike against huge pensions cuts that are not necessary, but we're also on strike against pay inequality and discrimination." Scottish Labour education spokesperson Michael Mara MSP described the demonstration as the biggest rally we've had outside the Parliament since the election last year. Mr Mara told the rally, "You have the full solidarity and support of the Scottish Labour Party and the Scottish Labour movement." Scottish Lib Dem leader Willie Rennie commented, "The university sector is not getting funded sufficiently. We need to stand for decent pensions, but we also need to stand against short-term contracts. You've got one of the best sectors in the whole world. It's about time this government and the university bosses respected that and funded that to make the difference." SNP MSP and Deputy Convener of Holyrood's Education Committee, Cowcub Stewart, confirmed that Education Minister Jamie Hepburn had met with the UCU and Universities Scotland to encourage everyone to continue with the current negotiations in an attempt to resolve the situation. Ms Stewart added that over this parliamentary session she would be supporting the SNP Green government in bringing the total student support package to the equivalent of the living wage over the next 3 years. Green MSP and former University of Aberdeen rector Maggie Chapman also said, "We've been fighting this fight for far too long. We may have won some battles over the years, but we should not have to be here fighting the same fight. We've already seen cases of universities threatening and criticising their workers for taking action, but they forget, in reality, who really has the power. You the workers, you the students." STUC President Rods Foyer said, "I'm sick of hearing about how we're building a more inclusive economy, because that isn't the truth. The truth is we're going backwards. Living standards for working people are falling in Scotland, while the rich continue to get richer." An article written by Sean Bell.
The National, February 24. Climate Change Committee writes urgent letter on energy futures to UK Government. Report by Gregor Young. The UK Government's Advisory Climate Change Committee, CCC, has written to the UK Business Secretary warning that commissioning new oil and gas drilling is not the best way to protect consumers from rocketing energy prices. The letter to Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng said, "We support a tighter limit on production with stringent tests and a presumption against exploration. An end to UK exploration would send a clear signal to investors and consumers that the UK is committed to the 1.5 centigrade degree global temperature goal." The letter also undercuts the arguments for UK oil and gas expansion by stating that expanding UK fields will have marginal impacts on prices for consumers, especially as UK oil fields take, on average, 28 years from granting an exploration licence to development. In 2020, the International Energy Agency said that there should be no new oil and gas fields approved for development anywhere in the world to keep within the 1.5 degree limit of dangerous climate warming. University College London research found that new oil and gas licenses were incompatible with the UK's international climate commitments. In the letter, CCC advised that weaning the UK off fossil fuels and not more North Sea drilling is the best way to protect consumers. They also added, "The best approach to reducing consumer bills is by driving down demand for a fossil fuel supply through measures such as insulating homes, installing heat pumps, changing over to electric-powered vehicles, and further developing wind and solar power energy infrastructure." The CCC also advised that backwards steps on renewable energy and home efficiency have added £140 to average energy bills across the UK, and also commented that even if emissions from producing oil and gas fields in the UK are lower than most, we'd still be feeding into a larger global market for fossil fuels and undermining global climate targets. Rosie Rogers, head of oil and gas transition for Greenpeace UK, said, "Anyone who's read this advice and thinks the North Sea's future lies in oil and gas is utterly deluded, because it will take decades and will not ease energy bills." While this letter is addressed to Kwasi Kwarteng, Chancellor Rishi Sunak needs to take on board this evidence-based analysis, stop hoping to resurrect a declining fossil fuel industry, and instead support the real solutions to the energy crisis as we approach the spring statement. The future of the North Sea is in renewables. Our economy, our energy security, and our climate depend on it. Friends of the Earth Scotland's Just Transition campaigner, Ryan Morrison, said, "In advising ministers to support a tighter limit on oil and gas production and a presumption against exploration, the UK CCC are adding their voice to the growing chorus, urging the UK government to end its plans to expand the supply of climate-wrecking oil and gas. The UK government must finally listen to science and scrap their plans to dish out more licences and approvals to the oil and gas companies who are hell-bent on destroying the climate for their own profit. This advice spells out the benefits of ending UK oil and gas, and the clear signal this would give to investors and consumers, helpfully highlighting that the best way to protect people from future exposure to volatile prices is to get off fossil fuels entirely. It also recognises the international importance of restricting the supply of fossil fuels in limiting dangerous warming to 1.5 centigrade and encouraging other nations to boost their climate efforts. The UK government has worked with the oil and gas industry to create a climate compatibility checkpoint for future oil and gas exploration licenses. This is currently under public consultation, but is regarded by climate campaigners as nothing more than a cynical attempt to greenwash expanding oil and gas production. The CCC also advised that this checkpoint be applied to fields awaiting approval, such as Campbell and Rosebank. Morrison concluded, no credible climate test could ever allow the production of new oil and gas. To provide certainty for the industry and live up to our climate commitments, the UK government must immediately stop new oil and gas and instead begin a managed phase-out of existing fields while ensuring a just transition for affected workers and communities. Report by Gregor Young. The National, February 24. What are the UK Conservative Party's links to Russian money, and who are the donors? Report by Craig Meehan. Amid threats of a full-on invasion into Ukraine, the UK government has vowed tough economic sanctions against Vladimir Putin's Russia. But the Tories have long been criticised for their own economic links to Russian money and have faced a barrage of calls to stop accepting such donations. In 2020, a report condemned successive UK governments for failing to protect Britain from Russian influence. It said that Russian influence at the highest levels of society was the new normal. And on Wednesday, the SNP's Westminster leader said Boris Johnson was allowing a sewer of dirty Russian money to run Britain because oligarchs donate to the Tory party. Ian Blackford said the Prime Minister cannot be trusted to clean up Britain's relationship with Russian oligarchs if he cannot do it in his own party. But what are the Conservative Party's links to Russian money? How much money have Russian-linked donors given to the Conservative Party? Since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, the Conservative Party has accepted more than £2 million from donors linked to Russia, and a quarter of the PM's cabinet has received donations from such individuals. Several influential Russian-linked donors have paid hundreds of thousands just to dine with Tory politicians. What Tory politicians are linked to donors? According to a 2020 report, 14 ministers and 2 MPs in Johnson's government at the time were linked to Russian donors. Among them were Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Cabinet Minister Alok Sharma. They were joined by 8 junior ministers and 2 MPs, including Theresa Villiers and Mark Pritchard, both of whom sit on the Intelligence and Security Committee. Johnson himself has come under fire for taking part in a tennis match with Lubov Chernukin alongside then Prime Minister David Cameron in 2014 in exchange for a £160,000 donation to the party. Chernukin's husband, Vladimir, was previously Putin's finance minister. In 2019, Chernukin also dined with former Prime Minister Theresa May and the cabinet members, following a £135,000 donation. As well as this, a £30,000 donation saw her take part in a dinner with then Education Secretary Gavin Williamson. In 2018, she also paid £20,000 to have lunch with former Scottish Tory leader Ruth Davidson. It is still unknown whether the meal ever took place. Lubov is the largest female donor in British political history, giving away £2 million to the Conservatives from 2012 to 2020. Lubov earned more controversy after it was discovered she sat on a government advisory board where she reportedly got access to senior figures in Downing Street. Meanwhile, Russian-British businessman Viktor Fedotov's companies backed 34 Tory MPs. Fedotov allegedly made millions from a corrupt Russian pipeline deal. Documents in the Pandora Papers in 2021 suggest Fedotov and two others made fortunes from a company in the mid-2000s, around the time it was alleged to have been siphoning funds from the Russian state pipeline monopoly Transneft. The BBC reported that he benefited from an alleged $4 billion fraud in Russia. His lawyers have denied this. What are Boris Johnson's other connections? The Prime Minister has a close relationship with newspaper mogul Evgeny Lebedev, son of a Russian oligarch and former KGB agent Alexander Lebedev. While London Mayor, Johnson made repeated trips to Evgeny's Italian villa for what his spokesman described as a purely personal trip. Overruling advice from the House of Lords Appointments Commission, Johnson later handed the businessman a peerage. The Insider has reported that Evgeny has since failed to attend a single vote in the House of Lords. Why are Russian-linked millionaires donating to the Tory party? According to the Tory Foreign Office Minister for Europe and North America, it is because they share the Conservative Party's objectives and aims. But according to others, it is because they want one thing: influence. Many hefty donations made by those with links to Russia have been followed by an in-person meet-up with senior members of the party. What's the Conservative Party's defence? The Tories say all donors are legitimate and claim that the donors merely happen to have Russian heritage. Criticised on the issue, Johnson accused his opponents of Russophobia. Asked about Chernukin specifically, Liz Truss, who has been pictured with her, said, "I think it's very important we don't conflate people with Russian heritage with people close to the Putin regime." And Tory Minister James Cleverly defended the donations, saying Russian-linked donors do not influence government policy in any way. Report by Craig Meehan.
Recorded from the National on the 24th of February 2022, from the Culture section. Six-legged scorpions and giant crocodiles, the most amazing Scottish fossil discoveries, by Beth Whitelaw. A superlative sauropod fossil found on the Isle of Skye has sparked headlines around the world after it rewrote the history books of the Jurassic era. Found on the eastern coast of the Scots Isle, the approximately 160-million-year-old skeleton was in almost pristine condition, articulated and almost complete, with its teeth even still coated in enamel. As spectacular as the pterosaur fossil it is far from the first Scottish find to have left a permanent mark on the history books. The country's rich and wide-ranging fossil heritage spans 1,200 million years of Earth's history. Scotland has offered up some of the Earth's oldest known insect, plant and mammalian remains, contributing a plethora of information in the study of evolution. The pterosaur is the latest in a long-ranging list of fossil discoveries made by paleontologists. Here are some of the other most important additions to the fossil record found in Scotland. 1. The Irish elk, Megalosaurus, Maybole, Ayrshire. One of the largest species of deer to ever walk the planet, this elk stood at more than 2 meters in height, with antlers that span 9 feet in diameter. Preserved by its eventual resting place of peat and boulder clays, its fossilised remains were found in Ayrshire in 1837. The cranium and antlers of the Irish elk can be viewed in William Hunter's collection in the Hunterian Museum, University of Glasgow. 2. Bearsden shark, Acmonistean sangerli, Bearsden, Glasgow. The shallow tropical seas of the Carboniferous period left behind a treasure trove of rare and beautifully preserved shark fossils from 330 million years ago. The top prize of these was discovered by Stan Wood in the shale beds of Bearsden's Mansburn, Glasgow, in 1981. Thanks to the thick mud the shark lay in when it died, the cartilage and skeleton were not destroyed by predators or environmental wear. The remains of the shark's last meal could even still be seen inside its stomach. At the time of discovery, only the teeth and spines of fish species of this age had been found, so it was a landmark moment in paleontology. The Acmonistean was celebrated in Edwin Morgan's poem, The Bearsden Shark, and the site of the find is marked with a plaque and cairn. 3. Sea scorpions, Heberatopteris erypterid, Fife. A number of unusual near-whole fossils of sea scorpions, or erypterids, have been found in Scotland over the past 150 years. Long extinct, they are found in rocks formed by the Paleozoic period, 445 to 300 million years ago. Most frequently preserved is the armoured shell due to its tougher makeup. A particular species of eurypterid called Heberatopteris was found in Fife in the form of a 330 million year old trackway. The tracks left by the 6-legged water scorpion measured around 6 meters long and 1 meter wide, one of the longest of this kind in the world. The eurypterid made the trackway as it walked across a sandbar, which formed into solid sandstone through geological processes. It is one of Scotland's most important fossil finds of recent years. 4. Crocodile-like reptile, Cheirotherium, Aaron Elgin. The Cheirotherium was a 12-foot-long crocodile-like reptile in 4 different locations on Arran, where it lives around 270 million years ago. The creature left behind footprint trails. Some of the prints are up to 40 centimeters in length, with large talons imprinted. Arran was part of the supercontinent Pangaea at the time, and would have been a hot, arid seaside climate. Number 5. Early land plants, Aberdeenshire. Species of plants dating back 400 million years have been found in Scotland. Among the best preserved were the Devonian period plants, discovered in layers of Riney chert rock in Aberdeenshire. These fossils would have been formed as volcanic springs bubbled, releasing silica-rich chemicals into the air and perfectly preserving the plants in detail, so rich that even the cell and vascular structures of the stems are clear. Alongside the plants, the remains of mites and spider-like animals make up the earliest complete terrestrial wetland ecosystem yet to be found on Earth. This information in this article was sourced from Scottish Geology. That article was by Beth Whitelaw.
And that was this week's The National Podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes with the publisher's kind permission. Thanks for listening.